بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد أفلح المؤمنون الذين هم في صلاتهم خاشعون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Mu'minun, the first to the second ayah. Here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by declaring success, yani falah, not in terms of power, not in terms of wealth, not in terms of popularity, but in terms of what you call a state of the heart. Yani khushu in salah, khushu, yani having humility. Yes, because you're standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that moment and you have to become humble. So think about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have said, those who pray, alladhina yusalluna. But he said, alladhina hum fihi salatihim khashi'un. That here, the imagery here is like being drowned in an ocean of what you call humility. Not just performing an act, but inside salah. Yani clothed and surrounded by what? Khushu. So here, it's like the prayer becomes a garment and the khushu is the fabric. So if you remove the fabric, yani you are just left with the skeleton of motions only. Yani it just moves like that. So when you look at this in connection to what you call the real life, which the life which you are living in, you ask yourself these questions. How many Muslims today pray, but their minds are on WhatsApp, their hearts are in the marketplace, yani their fears are even about rent, their hopes are in the stock market, that's not the khushu, that's not khushu. Because if Allah SWT, when Allah SWT is talking about people of khushu, this is not the type. And you see here, the purpose here is that without khushu, salah becomes like a body without a soul. So the body moves, but it doesn't live. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that this khushu is the reason for what you call falah, yani success in dunya and akhirah. Not because the act of bowing itself changes your rizq, but because the state of what you call khushu, yani it transforms you entirely. Yes, entirely psychologically. So, when you look at this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declaring success upon the mu'min when they are in a state of khushu, standing in front of Him. So, when you stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with khushu, the dunya shrinks. That tyrant there, he becomes just a servant like you. Yes, that bank debt you have, it becomes just a number. That anxiety about the future, it just becomes a whisper. Why? Because you are standing before the King of Kings. Yes? It's like the heart. The heart, when it's truly in salah, it becomes what you call a fortress. And every arrow of dunya bounces off. So, without khushu, the fortress wall collapses. And every worry, every fear, every temptation penetrates. So, when you look at this, we should understand the importance of having what you call khushu in salah. So, like for example, when you want to talk about a revolution, it starts with what? Khushu. A revolution of yourself, your soul. Because a people who cannot concentrate before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always be distracted before tyrants. A nation that cannot humble itself in salah will be humiliated in dunya. So this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began the list of the believers with this quality. Because without it, the rest of the qualities are fragile. And they can easily break at any time. So, coming to my conclusion about this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He says, Alladhina hum fi salatihim khashi'un, that when they're in the act of salah, in depth, they're in a state of khushu, that fee, yes, harf of jar. He is not just describing them, he is inviting us to turn our salawat from what you call mechanical habits of just moving into living encounters. Yani feeling that spiritual engagement. From empty shells into glowing lanterns. From a calendar obligation into a ladder of falah. And wallahi billahi tallahi, if we can rebuild khushu in our salah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will rebuild the dignity of this ummah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa